And so, I'm reviewing all the important films of 2022. Yes, by that I mean the Oscar-nominated movies, and yes, I am being cheeky because although they consider all these movies very important out there on Mount Olympus, I don't necessarily agree, but I still try to watch them all anyway. And now it's The Fabelmans, Steven Spielberg's autobiographical coming-of-age epic about the origins of a young Jewish filmmaker who grew up with his mobile family in New Jersey, Arizona, and California before going on to become the most successful motion picture director of his generation. Glowing reviews and standing ovations at festivals did not amount to box office gold, and the movie was a gigantic bomb. But did it deserve that fate? Let's take a look. You may ask yourself why Spielberg has waited so long to make this particular movie. Obviously his most personal work. So personal, in fact, that many people were assuming the man would retire after making it. This was an incorrect assumption, as he is currently developing a sequel to Bullitt with Bradley Cooper, so I guess we'll see. But anyway, of course he waited this long. He had to. In order for this movie to be the very specific sort of nostalgia piece that it is, he had to be sitting back in his mid-70s, reflecting on his childhood and adolescence, and how and why he came to arrive at where he is right now. You will of course wonder exactly how much of all this is entirely true, and there's honestly no reason to think any of it is untrue. Spielbergian historians will tell you, in fact, that The Greatest Show on Earth was the first movie Spielberg ever saw, and that he was obsessed with it, in particular with the big climactic train crash, and it was that obsession which led him to become a filmmaker, and that is in fact what you see in this movie. It's also been pretty much established as Spielbergian lore that he had a relatively cool suburban upbringing with his relatively cool parents and his relatively cool sisters, and they moved around a lot, and then at one point his parents became estranged from one another, but in any case everything turned out fine. And that, I suppose, is the one thing that was a bit of a head-scratcher for me, the circumstances of his parents' conflict. One would assume that maybe this is a dramatic fabrication. And maybe some of it is, since a big plot point of the movie involves the young Spielberg surrogate making a shattering discovery about his parents through the magic of filmmaking, not unlike John Travolta in Blowout. Yes, I know David Hemmings did it first. Settle down. I'm just saying that might be poetic license for dramatic purposes, sure. But then again, Spielberg did wait until both of his parents were dead before making this movie out of fear it would hurt them. And they only just died within the last 5 years or so, that being one of the other reasons why he waited this long to make this movie. I mean, consider his father died just 3 years ago at the age of 102. So there's a very good chance that Spielberg's parents were going to outlive him, and maybe this movie would never have been made. And that would have been a shame, because it really is quite wonderful, and I also don't see how his parents could have felt hurt by any of this. The movie is so clearly a loving tribute to them, and just a generally romanticized and exuberant view of Spielberg's childhood and adolescence. It's a movie that drips with love and affection. But that love and affection did not transfer to general audiences, and let's be fair, maybe that's understandable. Again, this is a very personal film for Spielberg, and it must have miffed him just a little bit that his little memoir didn't become a blockbuster, but then again, why would it? Of course it has a lot of meaning for him, but apart from him, it should only have meaning to hardcore film buffs, and in particular hardcore Spielberg enthusiasts, and I mean really hardcore enthusiasts, of which there aren't many, believe me, of any filmmaker. I mean, let's see, I don't know. If Jordan Peele decided to make a nostalgia piece about his childhood in a movie that didn't include weird sci-fi horror elements and pointed anti-conservative social commentary, would anyone outside of the hardcore faithful really care to watch? Probably not. And so that's the case here, but for those that can make time for it, The Fabelmans really is a lovely movie. Spielberg very vividly recreates the eras of his upbringing, the 50s and 60s, come to life, and he recreates more idealized versions of the same inventive home movies he made way back when. And he just generally evokes that spirit of being a young, aspiring artist, full of verve and ambition, and more importantly, he is honest about the essential selfishness of artists. where they put their artistic ambition above all else. There's a great scene to that effect with Judd Hirsch as Spielberg's crazy uncle. It's such a powerful scene that it, and it alone, is responsible for landing the esteemed Hirsch an Academy Award nomination. He's great, and so is the surprise guest star that also appears in just one scene, and I wouldn't dream of spoiling his participation other than to say it gives the movie a fantastic punchline. But the performances are all on point. Michelle Williams and Paul Dano make Spielberg's parents into very likable film characters, and Gabriel LaBelle is pretty terrific as his director's alter ego. If you have any familiarity with Spielberg as an adult from watching interviews and whatnot, then you can easily see him as a young man in LaBelle's performance. So the movie bombed, fair enough, and maybe it can only exist for a very limited audience that has great affection for the pieces of pop history that it evokes. And I am definitely a member of that limited audience, so I was completely charmed by this film. I loved it. But you know what? It's such a well-crafted nostalgia piece that it should be able to function as just a very entertaining coming-of-age story about a generally happy and comfortably middle-class Jewish family. One could say the movie has no stakes, since we know that Spielberg turned out okay, and not only that, turned out to be an extremely successful person. But does everything need to have stakes? Does everything need to be life and death, gloom and doom, and so on? I think there's space in our cultural diet for pleasant stories about good people. Stories full of whimsy and good feeling, with bits and pieces that are very human and relatable, and they ultimately leave you with a smile on your face. And this is one of those stories. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do give me a like and subscribe to my channel. Feel free to share it with all your friends and get me some new viewers. And then come on back and check out all the other film reviews and podcasts and ruminations and what have you. I'm doing what I can to put forth content to keep you entertained. See you next time.